My name's Adam McLaughlin, and this is the Church Marketing Ideas Podcast. Practical ideas to help your church build trust in your community. Welcome to the Church Marketing Ideas Podcast, episode 004. I'm excited today to have Mark MacDonald on with me. He's the author of the book, Be Known for Something, and you could track down all of the show notes today at churchmarketingideas.com/004. And also for all of our listeners, we are giving away a copy of his book, Be Known for Something, to one person who takes a screenshot while you're listening to the podcast and tags us on Twitter or Instagram at CMI Podcast. So that's Church Marketing Ideas, CMI. So just take a screenshot wherever you're listening today, or if you're watching on YouTube, take a screenshot and tag us on Twitter or Instagram at CMI Podcast for your chance to win a copy of Mark's book, Be Known for Something. And at the end of every episode, we answer a listener question. And today's question is all about free design tools that your church can use to step up your design game. Well, without further ado, here's my conversation with Mark MacDonald, the Executive Director of the Center for Church Communications, which is the home of brands like Church Marketing Sucks, Creative Missions, and he leads BeKnownForSomething.com, which is a church consulting agency that helps churches and people become relevant in their community. He's the best-selling author of Be Known for Something, the book that you can win if you screenshot the podcast and tag us at CMI Podcast. Side note, over the past 30 years, Mark has served as a designer, creative director, and strategist in one of Eastern Canada's largest agencies, at Pinpoint Creative in North Carolina, and most recently, he was the communication strategist for the 3,000-plus Florida Baptist churches. He and Tammy, his wife of 30 years, have two grown sons in Calgary and Chicago, and you could follow him at Mark Mac1023 and at his church communications blog, BeKnownForSomething.com. After a word from our sponsors, my interview with Mark MacDonald. Hey, Tyler, just tell us a little bit about what the Engage Conference is all about.
So the Engage Conference is an online, completely free conference that we put together to help church leaders navigate the technology that is so necessary in today's world. But what we're finding is so many churches just lack the resources, the time, the energy, the money to be able to navigate all of the technology that's just so imperative for us to be able to reach people. And so we've brought some of the best minds in the church space and the technology space all coming together so that we can focus right around how do you implement technology inside the church so that you can reach more people in your community.
Perfect. Our listeners can sign up for free to the Engage Conference at churchmarketingideas.com/engage. Thanks, Tyler. Mark MacDonald, thank you so much for hanging out on the podcast with me.
I mean, to be able to talk to another Canadian, I mean, that's what it. If we could only just have some Tim Horton coffee or a Canadian maple donut,
it would be delicious. Some people just don't know, and some of the listeners have no idea what we're talking about, and that's all right with me. I'm okay with that. By the way, office goals behind you, you have a beautiful setup, and quite frankly, you could be in a tool shed, but you're in Florida, and that would be an office goal for me. Tell me a little bit about what's going on in Florida for you.
Well, Florida is going very well. I'm not sure when you're going to be broadcasting this, but it's not snowing here, and that makes this Canadian very happy. But things are going really well. I'm the executive director for Center for Church Communications. If you know Church Marketing Sucks or Courageous Storytellers or even our Creative Missions, you would probably recognize some of our brands. Center for Church Communications, I mean, we work with almost 10,000 churches all across the country, and I just can't believe I get to do what I get to do. And then on the side, I also do a little bit of consulting and speaking and working with churches, and there's some other things on the horizon, which maybe by the time this gets broadcast, if you just Google me, You might find more than you ever intended, but it'll also it'll tell you a little bit about what I'm going to be doing.
Yeah, and we had Matt Ayersman on the show, and so his podcast or his episode will either have already happened or be coming up. I'm not sure. We're batch recording all of these in November. They're going to be coming out between January and June, a little bit behind the curtains, but we'll make sure we link to that in the show notes. Mark, I'm so excited to have you on because from the very first time we met and you picked a restaurant that we would go to breakfast at using a Yelp review. And at the end of our breakfast, an ambulance pulled up and removed somebody from the kitchen. I just have felt this Canadian brother connection with you ever since that moment.
You can't write something as great as that initial meeting. I mean, we had such a great conversation and we were just like, long lost friends, and then that medical tragedy happened.
Right. And we don't know any details. It was just interesting that we had finished our food at that point in time when the ambulance pulled up and took somebody out of the kitchen. If our food hadn't arrived yet, I'm not sure what the next course of action would have been. But you know what? Mark picked that restaurant with Yelp. I get to pick the next one. That's just the rules.
Absolutely.
So I'm excited. At that point in time, you hadn't released Be Known for Something yet. It was like coming out a few months later. Now you've released Be Known for Something and your book, and I'm excited to chat with you about this. So give us a high-level overview. Where did Be Known for Something, the idea, come from?
You know, it's so crazy. I was senior creative director for one of Eastern Canada's largest ad agencies. The entire time that I worked there, I was more in design. I have a graphic design degree. The more I climbed the ladder there to become senior creative director, the more I realized, okay, well, maybe design isn't all that important. I know, sacrilege, but it's like more about the content. And if you're, you might have a nice looking message, but if the message doesn't resonate, then people aren't going to be all that interested in it. And what I realized was that, oh my goodness, there is just so much noise going on in the world today. And every time you turn around, there's just more and more content. I'm amazed at how much is pushed towards us, and thanks to smartphones and being online all the time, we're just getting so much bombarded with messaging over and over again, and that noise that we experience, every person, you, me, every person listening to this, we have the skill set to be able to tune things out. My wife would also talk about this a little bit differently. But ultimately, we all know how to tune out the things that we don't find relevant. And the problem is that the church today, we keep thinking, why isn't the community listening to us? And because of all this noise, the church is one of the last things that they want to listen to. And the scary thing is that as communications people, we have community and we have congregation. I mean, we always grumble and complain about our community. The community doesn't want to listen to the church. Our congregations don't want to listen to us anymore. In fact, they've all gotten so much noise from this communication field being pushed at them that they've all decided what's relevant to them and what's not relevant to them. So, my team and I, we sat down and we started to kind of walk through all of this, and we realized, okay, well, we choose what we want to listen to based upon what we know about something. And what if we could become known for something so that people would find us relevant? And what we realized was, okay, well, that would help us focus content, and it would also help us focus what becomes our skill set. And if our church would actually become known for that one thing that the community would listen to, they would start listening to us. Our congregation would be able to pass that message on a whole lot easier. So as we started talking about it, I realized, oh my goodness, this book just needs to be written in the way that, okay, let's walk through how do we determine what we should be known for so that we are relevant and needed in our communities.
Yeah, and I'm all about building trust, and consistency builds trust. And if nobody realizes, whoever's just listening, you don't realize that I actually have that tattooed across my forehead. The people watching on YouTube know that I do. But that's a joke. But consistency builds trust. So when we're consistent about the message that we're saying over and over and over and over, then we get to be known for that in the community. And if somebody wants dance lessons, that's probably not what they're going to go to your church for. But if they need help with their family life and you're known for that, for instance, then they'll start to trust that you're the go-to authority on that. I find that churches want to be all things to all people. So I know it's a surprise and a revelation I'm happy to share with you, Mark, but I would love it if you could talk a little bit about why that is not the solution.
Oh my goodness. The big issue today is that if you try to reach everybody, you have to have a ton of communication materials that you're going to be pushing. Okay, you probably have team limitations. Some of you are the team. So if you think you're juggling a lot now, the more audiences you bring into the mix, the more you have to juggle. And then you can't really become an expert about everything, because you would have to become an expert about everything. So I guess that we have to make sure that we don't become a messaging source for everyone. We have to figure out what is one thread that unites all of our audiences, our community, and our congregation, so that if you start talking about it, they'll go, "Whoa, okay, what was that?" It's kind of like if, thank God I don't have any back pain. I know that a lot of people struggle with it, but the moment that I say back pain, it immediately unites a diverse audience. I mean, there's old people, there's strangely enough some younger people that have some sports injuries and things, and you have this diversity. And speaking of diversity, I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're white, Asian, African American, whatever color you are. If you have back pain, it unites that group. It's kind of like no one sits around in an AA meeting and says, "Well, how come you're here? You're Asian." Well, no, I'm not here because of my race. I'm here because of my needs. And that's what we need as a church. We need to figure out what unites us. And if you have a problem with diversity, or if you have a problem with attracting various groups to your church, you're probably not pushing a need that would unite all of those things. And it also calms everything down. That noise that I talk about, it just makes it easier. If you can say less so that people listen more, that's where you become the king of communications in your church.
So talk to me a little bit about the perception that somebody might be hearing you say this, and hearing you say, we're only going to reach this type of person for Jesus. We're not going to pay any attention to them. And I think what that ignores is the group of churches in your city who all could be known for something, and together are able to reach all different people. And so talk to me a little bit about the church that thinks that being focused on something is actually hurting their opportunity to reach everyone.
Wow. I guess I can pretty much sum it up that if you try to reach everyone, you'll end up reaching nobody. If you end up really focusing on one group, you can pretty much saturate the dependence of that group on you. So it was interesting. I drove here, and as I was in the car, I heard a radio commercial for a law firm, and And when you think about law firms, like how many commercials you hear, and
Right.
and like they just become whoa, 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 whoa. I mean, like it's just a drone of, yeah, we offer this, or we chase this ambulance, or, we'll get you more money or whatever. Well, this firm that was advertising, they were talking about the fact of how their law firm is based upon great service. And I thought, wah, 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 because everyone says that. But
Right.
then they said, but we also know, and there's a military base around us, and they say, we know that some people have committed their life to service, and we want to tip our hat to them to say, thank you for your service. And we also understand that in the military, it's a incredible stress on your marriages. So if you're going through a divorce, we specialize in helping you, and we use great service because we want to thank you for your service. And I thought, whoa, there it is. That's like, all of a sudden they broke through. And especially as soon as they said the military, every person who was listening in that was ever attached to military would instantly listen in. And so it's just a matter of figuring out, okay, so what is a small group that would be interested in something, and there's enough people in that group, if you attract them, that they'll listen to you and you can engage a fairly large audience. But at the end, like at the end of the commercial, I thought, like, I mean, I'm not in the military, but if I ever need a law firm, man, they seem like they really got it. And so other people, like, you can target a group and you can saturate that group with a message, and you can attract that group. It doesn't mean that you will never reach anybody outside. Also, if you go with a felt need, whether that's, something that, they're waking up and they're really struggling with. So maybe it's, I was working with a church recently, and they said that where this church is, they have a major highway, and everyone on the other side of the highway is very wealthy. On their side of the highway, they're middle class, and every person around their church only wants to get to a point where they can move across the highway. Like, isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
But they summed up this large group of people. So what they decided to do was, it's like, what if you could achieve more? And that, I don't want to get into the prosperity gospel or anything like that, because it was not that at all.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you come up with a felt need in a group of people, it broadens it a whole lot more than saying, we're only going to be looking at 18 to 24-year-olds who have 2 kids. That, like, don't do anything like that. You need to have a broad enough group. But you know what? You'll probably focus on one group of people, but there'll always be outliers that will go, ooh, I like that too. And well, they'll end up coming to your church anyway.
Yeah, and in a practical sense, we're not talking about being so narrow that we just are repeating our slogan over and over. In the sense of the church that you talked about, you could be offering business breakfasts, you could be offering entrepreneur classes, you could be talking about the biblical basis for finances, you could be offering women in business luncheons, and focused around, though, what does it take to get me from A to B, right? So talk to me a little bit about how you choose what the something is you want to be known for. So we talked about not being so narrow, but we also talked about not being so broad. Where's the middle ground? How do we choose that something? How can we figure that out?
Yes. Discover your thread. That's what we continually talk about. And if not, you'll have too many messages and people will stop listening to you. To discover your thread, what you have to realize, it cannot start with the leadership of the church to determine what that thread is. It has to start with the audience. Effective communication rises and falls on how well you know your audience. You have to do everything in your power to know your audience. Make sure that there's a large enough group of those people, and what are their felt needs, not their spiritual needs, but the things that they're waking up in the morning and saying, man, I wish that I could do this, which is a goal, or I wish I could fix this, which is a need. And if you can become a solution to those needs or a path to their goals, and really focus in on that thread, some people call it a tagline, some people call it a positioning statement. But if you can really come up with something that's short, sweet, and really speaks to a specific audience, you will break through, and you can actually say less so that they'll listen more.
So give me some hands-on practical examples that you've seen. I know you've worked with hundreds, likely thousands of churches to help them discover their thread. And give me some practical examples of what some of those actual threads have been.
Sure. And it's that whole thing of, okay, I've done so many that I can't think of any. But I guess, well, in the book, we kind of deal with several of them. And there's one. Okay. So there was in the Houston area, Texas, there was a church that when we got in and we started talking to people, we realized in their community, all their community was there to work in the oil industry. Every one of them had crazy dreams of, Beverly Hillbillies. It's like, I'll drill in my backyard and all of a sudden this, spigot of oil will come up. And what we realized was that every person wanted a big goal. And the problem was that it wasn't happening as quickly, or a lot of people realized with the downturn that there was it was just very tough, and a lot of people were struggling. And when we sat down, one of the things that we would recommend is, first of all, demographic study of your area. That'll reveal a ton of information. There's so much big data out there right now that is fairly easy for a church to get. Like, if your church is part of a denomination, contact your denominational office, and they'll probably have a way to give you demographic information. Then I would recommend, once you hone in on a specific type of person, start talking to those people, bring them in for focus groups. When we started talking to these people, and I don't know, like 10 or 12 people in a room, you really want to make sure that if they know you're from a church, they'll want to talk all spiritual. They'll want to make sure that, that they got the right answer, and they quote scripture and then they forget where the scripture's from. And but the thing is that, like, let them off the hook. And it's like, no, we want to know about you and your life. And what we heard was there was a crazy amount of frustration of, okay, so I've dedicated my life to doing an awful lot of things so that one day we could be successful. And what we heard over and over again, as soon as there was that, they talk about their goal and then their failure in the goal, they constantly went back to, there's got to be more. And when we started talking to the pastor and the leadership of the church, he made it really clear that he fully gets that. Oftentimes pastors struggle because it's like, wow, if I build it, they will come. Right. And we can't be grasping on to our goals to the point where our whole lives revolve around it. Like, there is more to life. And as we were talking about that, I was like, oh my goodness, just the idea of more to life, and that thread of there is more to life. The cool thing about a good thread is that it instantly communicates the type of person that your audience is. But also, as you look at all your ministries in your church, I mean, should we even talk about the amount of silos in a church, and the way that everyone thinks they're bigger and better than the other, and there's more hope and opportunity here than there is on here. And so you need to have this umbrella thread that all of the departments, the ministries in your church, they unite under that. They communicate it possibly differently, or they can even interpret it just in a way. More to life to a child is different than more to life as a senior citizen. So that's the unifying factor that oftentimes happens with a good thread. It kind of levels the playing field and allows each of the pastoral staff to try to figure out, okay, so how can we work this thread into our mix?
So when we've come up with the thread and we've done it based on the people that we're trying to reach, the people in our community, and we've found a thread that resonates and it checks all the boxes, it passes the litmus tests, how do we communicate that thread virtually in an ongoing way without becoming redundant? Like, how does it not become the thing that people don't want to hear anymore? And, you know, when I lived in Florida, we had a guy who owned some car dealerships, and he was on the radio all the time, and everybody knew that, you know, that guy's slogan, and of course it's escaping my mind at the moment, but you probably know who I'm talking about. How do we just continue to talk about the thread without it becoming so redundant and repetitive? So give me some practical ideas. Let's start in the context of social media. How can you talk about your thread over and over so your community gets it without being redundant?
Yeah. So what is the tattoo on your forehead?
Consistency builds trust. It's right here.
Consistency. So why is the word consistency acceptable, but redundancy feels awful? And the reason why is redundancy today is saying it exactly the same way over and over and over again. And consistency is, no, set up some fences to say, you know what, as part of this thread, here are multiple words that we can use in this playground that we're playing in, so that we keep coming back to the same thing. So over time, consistency feels right, and people will trust it. And if you just keep saying it over and over again, it becomes very boring. So what you need to do is you need to figure out, so what's the playground, you know, what's the sandbox that we're all in if we're going to adopt this thread. And if we adopt the thread, and we're in this sandbox, there are a plethora, I've never used that word out loud before.
Nice.
A plethora of different things that we can just play with. You know, more to life, think about how broad that is. And what we strongly urge leadership of the church is to, okay, so we're not telling you to make sure that the thread is in every sermon or every sermon series, but every sermon and every sermon series needs to at least have some connection to the ultimate thread.
Right.
And it's similar to the way, you know, Scripture is set up with the six books of the Bible, and the blood of Jesus Christ is drizzled from Genesis all the way through to Revelation, and that scarlet thread unites every passage of Scripture, every verse, every story, every parable. And that's the joy, is that as you're reading through Scripture, you can kind of stop and say, okay, so how does this attach itself to that scarlet thread, which is the saving, the saving blood of Jesus Christ. So, I mean, no one ever says, wow, the Bible, it's just, well, people do say it's boring, but not for those reasons. But the redundancy of it is done in such a way that it really creates, an amazing portrait of the thread, rather than one boring thing after the other.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, just offhand, the story of Abraham and Isaac, and the story of Esther, and then the story, like some of the parables, some of the parables that Jesus told you can see God's grace as a thread, even though they're completely different contexts. And I'm wondering if you can dig in a little bit about, we know a lot about, and it's becoming a common topic in marketing, how we use stories to kind of market or tell about our thread. So tell me a little bit about using that common thread, but using real life stories from people in your community and how we can leverage those two together.
Oh my goodness. As soon as you have your thread and this is what our church is going to be all about, and we have to establish that playground that we're in, or the sandbox. I always encourage people to put on your thread glasses at that point. So it's kind of like you put on red colored glasses and everything's red. Oh my goodness. Or so I just bought a car, and so it's a Toyota, and I'm not gonna, anyway. So the car, as I drive around in the car, when I first saw it, I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to be the only one with this car. And everywhere I turn, it's like, oh, I didn't realize, oh my goodness, it's out of the road. I am not the only person with a Toyota.
Right.
But we, as a communications person, we need to put on our thread glasses. And as soon as you know that sandbox that you're playing in, you're going to find out that there are stories like everywhere. Every time you turn around, what you want to do, and I worked with a church this morning that they have their thread now, and then I went through their website and I couldn't find their thread anywhere. And he said, yeah, but how do I force it through everything? And I said, you don't even have to force it through. Let's just call up any page. So I called up a page, and I said, so how do you think you could take that content and make it relevant to your thread? And like quickly he just went, oh, well, we could, and then he added in the thread. And that's where, like, there's pictures that you need to show the thread. So if your thread is delivered to somebody and it's a solution or a path to a goal, it's going to elicit an emotion. So your pictures need to have that same emotion, so that people, if it's an aha moment, I guess on Monday or Tuesday, I worked with another client, and their thread is a huge solution for somebody. And I said, so would it be, oh my goodness, I can't believe you just gave that to me? Or is it, relief? And if we can show that emotion, and even when people come to your church, if they can feel that emotion, then what you're doing is you're controlling. And I hate to add the other C word to consistency, but control is required for consistency.
Right.
Because if not, everyone will do what's right in their own eyes, and it'll all suck. Like, it'll just be really bad by the end of it all. So as a director of communications, even if you're not a director of communications, you still should be directing it. It's like a big orchestra leader of just making sure that everything falls into the groove of the thread. And you want to make sure that you're that as you're rolling that out, you're just listening for stories everywhere. And oftentimes the person in the congregation won't necessarily use the thread, but if you ask those questions of, so our church is about this, have you found that in your life? They'll oftentimes marry their idea with the idea of the church thread, and then the rest is just history. I mean, it just all starts to work. And then being known is actually a consistent message over and over again, so that someone actually becomes known for something. But we also have to be for something, because the overwhelming perception of the church is what we're against. The disciples were all hanging out with Jesus, and they looked at him and said, so Master, how will people know that we're your disciples? And he says, in John 13:35, well, they'll know you're my disciples if you have love one towards another. Well, we're awful at love because we're not known for love. We're known for what we're against. So we have to become known for something, and it's not a whole bunch of things. It's something, and that is what branding is all about. So it's just unifying that concept.
Yeah, I'm going to give a shout out right here to Phil Bowdle in his book, Rethink Communication, which was published by the Center for Church Communications. I know you had a hand in that. Phil Bowdle says
Love Phil Bowdle.
He's a great guy. I should have him on the podcast. Wait, I did. I'll link to that in the show notes. We're talking about Rethink Communication. And one of the things that stuck out for me, and something that he really drives home, is communication isn't someone's job, it's everyone's job. So knowing that communication is everyone's job and everything communicates, how do we get everyone on the same page for our thread?
It just happens.
Right. Okay, take two. The real answer is...
Oh yes, that's right. It never happens.
Right.
That's why, I'm executive director for Center for Church Communications. We have all of our different brands. You could say our different ministries, and there's a director over each one of those. As executive director, I have to make sure that I pull all of those directors into doing what's right for our entire brand. As a director of communications, and again, if you're not called director of communications, I knight thee as director, because you really do need to become that orchestra leader, that big director who very kindly shuffles people into a groove so that you become known for it. Because if not, they will randomly go off and do their own thing because they believe it's the right thing to do. But what you have to do, and again, you have to have like full leadership on board to all of this to be able to do it. You just have to make sure, okay, well, as part of our brand, we want to be known for this as our thread. So is there a way that we can shuffle you closer to it? In fact, the last third of the book kind of talks about the transactional approach of making sure that people kind of fall into line, and we just want to bribe them. That's pretty much is like, so you communicate the thread, we'll give you more communication materials. And once, it'll take a little bit when it gets started, but then after a while, they'll all jump on board. And right. If it makes sense and it does resonate and things become relevant, it'll just engage a group of people, and they're going to realize that it's the right thing if it's all based upon the audience that's around your church.
Mark, there's so much incredible information, and obviously we don't have time to dig into all of that in this podcast, but somebody wants to get the Be Known for Something book and apply this themselves, they can. And also, I know you work directly with churches to help them one-on-one figure out what is their thread and how can they apply these ideas. So tell us a little bit how we can connect with you online.
Well, fortunately, we've printed more than one book, so it is available. If you go to beknownbook.com or beknownforsomething.com and click on book, you'll end up a way to buy it. It's also a #2 Amazon bestseller, so it's on Amazon. But we like when you buy it through us rather than through Amazon. Sure. Although we love Amazon, and then if when you get to beknownforsomething.com, you're going to see we have a process that we go through, and I would love to come and do the full process, which is about a 6 to 9 month process with a church, and we work from top to bottom, help develop the brand, and then also make sure that it's implemented through a full strategy. If you're a communications person in a church, I also come in and I encourage you, like encourage you, so that I empower you, and I also motivate the rest of the staff to understand the importance of your job, so that I just want to put you up on a pedestal, because it is an incredibly hard job to be able to corral the cats that we have to corral in the church. Did I say it?
Yeah, you nailed it.
Take
Okay.
two. There are a lot of people wanting to do what's right in their own eyes, and oftentimes it just takes an outside consultant to come in to say, you guys have got to stop doing what's right in your own eyes. And then I love doing my keynote presentation where I start showing the ludicrous amount of messages and fonts and colors and all of that stuff. And I kind of unearthed it all.
Nice. I love it. Now, if somebody wants to connect with you directly, maybe they have a specific question for you, what's your favorite social media channel? How can they track you down online?
It's hard to have a favorite one. I mean, I have more Twitter followers than anything. I guess in all of my social media, I think I'm around 45,000 people. Like, it's just crazy. Pinterest. I just found out I have like almost 7,000 unique views every month on Pinterest.
It's incredible.
So Mark Mac 1023 is my handle, and if you go into any of them, I mean, Facebook, there's a personal one that's really close to not being able to have any more people. But there's also a Mark MacDonald author page that I would love for you to follow. There's also Be Known for Something page. I think there's 6,000 or 7,000 people on there. And then there's, I don't know, 14 or 15,000 people on my Twitter account. So I would love for you all to follow me. And just between you and me, if you want to even email me, it's just mark@beknownforsomething.com. And I'd love to, I know I talked about the big process, but I've also worked out a really kind of cool way. It's a 2-day process, and it's a fast process where I come in and set up the idea of the thread, get the whole leadership of your church excited about trying to figure out what their thread is. And then the second day, we actually, we've surprisingly been able to get about 80-85% of the time in one day figure out your thread. So all you do is just bring me in for a couple of days, and then I can also throw in a mystery visit at the same time where I can experience your church for the first time.
Love it. Mark, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I love having you on the podcast, and I know this is going to have to happen again because there's so much more to dig in.
I have so enjoyed it. Adam, you are a rock star. I love it.
Hey, Tyler, just tell us a little bit about what the Engage conference is all about.
So the Engage conference is an online, completely free conference that we put together to help church leaders navigate the technology that is so necessary in today's world. But what we're finding is so many churches just lack the resources, the time, the energy, the money to be able to navigate all of the technology that's just so imperative for us to be able to reach people. And so we've brought some of the best minds in the church space, in the technology space, all coming together so that we can focus right around how do you implement technology inside the church so that you can reach more people in your community.
Perfect. Our listeners can sign up for free to the Engage conference at churchmarketingideas.com/engage. Thanks, Tyler.
Hi, Adam. Our volunteer leaders have a bad habit of Google searching images and then printing them on posters or posting on Facebook with watermarks. We don't have a designer on staff yet, and we're looking for inexpensive but legal ways to create great designs. I'd love to hear some ideas on free tools to help with our church's design.
Okay, one of my favorite free tools that I use in design is Unsplash, which is unsplash.com. It's an entire library of high quality, high resolution, free images. There's no reason to Google search an image. Go to unsplash.com and right in their terms, it says you can use this for whatever you want, however you want, whenever you want. So go ahead, unsplash.com. That's a great free tool for finding images. And then for actual design, there's lots of free apps on your phone or online. One I think of right away is Canva, Canva.com. It's got a free tier for churches and nonprofits, and it'll do most of what you need it to do. If you're looking for a paid option to do some design work, then there's lots of options out there as well. But for free tools, I would recommend finding images from unsplash.com. And for design, I would recommend canva.com for simplicity and for the best tool to get the job done, make you look like you have a designer on staff. Hey, listen, if you have a question for the Church Marketing Ideas podcast, just go to churchmarketingideas.com and click the button that says Ask a Question. I promise I'll respond to every single question, and we'll even choose a few to show up on our podcast. Coming up on the next episode.
I would say just write down everything you're using right now. You'd be surprised by how many tools you're actually using, and you probably don't need that many. So let go of the ones that don't bring you joy and just stick to the ones that are actually moving the needle. So again, there's a place, and I think having the tool shed allows you that playground, because I think it's good to have, even if you never use those tools. That we all like to play with technology. So allow yourself that playground, but then be efficient in what you're using and why. So look at them with objective eyes. I'm spending all this money in software every month. What is it achieving?